Right now, there's a war going on. Not in the streets, not in your relationships, not at your job, but inside your mind. A war between the version of yourself that wants to grow and the version that wants to stay comfortable. Between discipline and distraction. Between action and excuses. Between who you are and who you could be. Most people lose this war without even knowing they are fighting it. They surrender to their weakest thoughts. They let their minds defeat them every day. But you don't have to be like most people. This is the war of the mind. And you're about to learn how to win all the battles that no one sees. Chapter 1. Your mind is a battlefield. Your mind is not your ally. It's not your tool. It's a battlefield. And every day, whether you realize it or not, you're at war. Two forces are fighting for control. One pushes you toward growth, discipline, and progress. The other drags you toward comfort, distraction, and decay. Every thought, every choice, every reaction is a battle between those two sides. And the side that wins most often becomes your life. That's the truth most people never see. They think they're making choices freely. They're not. They're surrendering. Over and over again. You don't lose the war of the mind all at once. You lose it through 1,000 small surrenders. One skipped workout, one snooze button, one moment of hesitation when you should have acted. Each surrender seems harmless, but each one strengthens the enemy. That's the key. Your life doesn't collapse overnight. It decays silently through the victories you hand your weaker self every single day. The two forces. Inside you, there are two armies. The higher self and the primitive self. Your higher self lives in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain capable of logic, planning, and delayed gratification. It's the general. It sees beyond the moment. It can sacrifice now for gain later. Your primitive self lives in the limbic system, the emotional core designed for survival, not success. It's the soldier of impulse. It wants comfort. It wants safety. It wants now. Every action you take is a vote for one of them. Every decision strengthens one side and weakens the other. When you choose to work instead of scroll, the higher self wins. When you choose comfort over discipline, the primitive self wins. Simple as that. You're not just making choices, you're reinforcing identities. Every victory for your higher self makes it stronger. Every surrender to your primitive self makes it louder. That's why change feels hard. Because you're not just forming new habits. You're fighting a war against an older, stronger army. The default state is defeat. Here's the brutal truth. If you're not actively fighting, you're losing. The mind defaults to comfort. The path of least resistance isn't neutral, it's regression. The world is built to feed your primitive self. Endless distractions, instant gratification, comfort on demand. Every environment is engineered to make surrender easy and strength rare. If you don't consciously choose discipline, you unconsciously choose decay. If you don't deliberately train your higher self, your primitive self will rule by default. There's no neutral zone in the war of the mind. You're either advancing or retreating. You're either training strength or training weakness. Every day, you have a choice. You always have a choice. That's the key. The invisible nature of the war. Most people never realize the war exists. They think their thoughts are random. They think procrastination is just being tired. They think distraction is harmless. It's not. Every unchallenged thought is a weapon turned against you. Every excuse you accept is an enemy infiltration. Every moment of unconscious reaction strengthens the wrong side. Awareness is your first weapon. You must see the war to fight it. You must recognize the voice of your primitive self when it speaks. It always sounds rational. It always sounds gentle. It always sounds like it's on your side. It says, you deserve a break. It says, you'll start tomorrow. It says, this isn't the right time. That voice is not you. That voice is the enemy, and you must stop listening. Training the mind for battle. Winning this war requires daily training, not occasional motivation, daily discipline. You can't think your way into control. You must train your way into control. You must build the muscle of awareness. You must build the reflex of resistance. You must build the pattern of winning. Start small. Every time your mind tells you to quit early, don't. Every time it tells you to delay, act now. Every time it tells you to explain, defend, or justify, stay silent and execute. Each victory, no matter how small, strengthens the higher self. That's the process. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. It's not about motivation. It's about momentum. You have a choice in every moment to obey emotion or to follow mission. Choose mission. Every time. The rules of engagement. Rule 1, awareness. You can't defeat an enemy you don't see. Observe your thoughts without attachment. Identify which side they come from, higher or primitive. Rule 2, delay reaction. Between stimulus and response, there's power. Pause for 3 seconds before every major choice. In those seconds, you decide who commands your mind. Rule 3, act fast when the higher self speaks. When logic whispers, move immediately. The longer you wait, the louder emotion becomes. Strike before hesitation builds. Rule 4, never negotiate with weakness. The primitive self wins through debate. Don't argue with it. Don't explain to it. Don't reason with it. Silence it through action. Rule 5, win small battles daily. Big victories are built on small wins. Wake up when you said you would. Finish what you start. Keep your word. Each small win is a flag planted on the battlefield. That's how you reclaim territory in your own mind. The cost of surrender. Every time you choose comfort, you pay in discipline. Every time you choose distraction, you pay in progress. Every time you choose delay, you pay in destiny. The cost of losing the internal war isn't obvious at first. It doesn't show up tomorrow. It shows up years later as regret. Regret is the receipt for battles you refuse to fight. And once it arrives, you can't return it. That's why you fight now. Because every choice compounds toward mastery or mediocrity, toward evolution or erosion. You have a choice, but you must choose consciously. Every day, the warrior mindset. The mental warrior doesn't wait for peace to fight. He fights to earn peace. He wakes up knowing the enemy will attack. He expects resistance. He welcomes it, because resistance means growth. Because every attack is an opportunity to strengthen control. The warrior mind never complains, never explains, never reacts. It acts. That's the difference between average and exceptional. Average people live in reaction. Warriors live in command. You can become one of them, but it starts with a declaration. You must declare, "My mind is a battlefield, and I am the commander." That declaration alone shifts your posture. It separates you from the reactive majority. Transition. You now understand the terrain. You know the two armies inside you. You know there's no neutral ground. And you know every choice is a weapon in this war. The next step is strategy. Because no commander wins without knowing his enemies. You can't fight what you can't name. You can't defeat what you don't understand. It's time to expose the forces that sabotage you daily. They don't come from outside. They come from within. You mastered the battlefield. Now, let's identify the enemies that live in your head. Chapter 2. Identify your internal enemies. You can't win a war if you don't know who you're fighting. Most people think the enemy is out there. Competition, circumstance, bad luck, unfair systems. They're wrong. The real enemies live inside your head. They don't attack with weapons. They attack with thoughts. They whisper. They rationalize. They disguise themselves as logic, safety, even self-care. You can't destroy what you refuse to name. So before you can win the war of the mind, You must expose the 5 internal enemies that sabotage you daily. Enemy 1, doubt. Doubt is the voice that kills before you begin. It whispers, "What if it doesn't work?" And the moment you entertain it, your execution dies. Doubt is not intelligence. Doubt is paralysis dressed as caution. It hides behind being realistic, but what it's really saying is stay small. You don't need certainty to act. You need direction. You need momentum. You need proof through doing, not thinking. That's the key. Action kills doubt faster than logic ever could. Every time you hesitate, doubt strengthens. Every time you move forward despite uncertainty, doubt weakens. You don't wait for confidence to act. You act until confidence appears. You don't wait for clarity to move. You move until clarity arrives. That's how you defeat doubt. Through movement, not meditation. Enemy 2, fear. Fear's job is survival. Your job is progress. Those missions conflict. Fear will always be there. It's ancient. It's wired into your biology. It kept your ancestors alive. But today it keeps you small. You can't eliminate fear. You can only redefine your relationship to it. Fear is not a stop signal. It's a compass. Whatever it points to, that's the direction of growth. When you feel fear, you're standing at the border between your current self and your potential self. You have a choice. Retreat to safety or advance into expansion. Fear loses power the moment you act. It feeds on avoidance. Starve it through exposure. That's why discipline requires discomfort. Every act of courage is a small act of rebellion against fear's command. Each rebellion builds armor. Remember this. Courage isn't absence of fear. Courage is command in the presence of fear. Enemy 3, comfort. Comfort is the silent assassin. It never shouts. It seduces. It says, "You've earned a break." It says, "Take it easy." It says, "You'll do it tomorrow." Comfort feels harmless. It's not. It's decay in disguise. Comfort is the slow death of potential. The graveyard of greatness is filled with people who meant to start next week. The primitive self loves comfort. It wants warmth, softness, and ease. The higher self thrives on resistance, friction, and demand. You can't have both. You can't grow and stay comfortable. You must choose. That's the key. Every time you feel the pull toward ease, interpret it as a warning. Comfort is the battlefield where most people surrender. The cure is voluntary discomfort. Seek it daily. Train it like a muscle. Cold showers, hard workouts, early mornings, difficult conversations. Every one of them is an act of mental war. The more comfort you reject, the more control you gain. Enemy 4, comparison. Comparison destroys more potential than failure ever could. It makes you measure your progress by someone else's timeline. It makes you despise your own pace. It makes you forget that you're fighting a different war altogether. Comparison says, they're ahead, you're behind. But you don't know their strategy. You don't know their costs. You don't know what battles they're losing while you're watching their highlight reel. You don't need their permission to win. You don't need their validation to progress. That's the key. Your fight is internal, not external. The only metric that matters is, are you better than yesterday? Your enemy is not another person. It's your own potential left unfulfilled. When you stop competing with others, you start dominating yourself. And self-domination is the only domination that lasts. Enemy 5, excuse. Excuse is the most dangerous enemy because it sounds reasonable. It doesn't scream. It explains. It builds logic around laziness. It builds stories around surrender. Excuse is the defense attorney for your weaknesses. It always has a case prepared. I didn't have time. I wasn't feeling it. I'm just waiting for the right moment. But that right moment never comes. Excuse is not a reason. It's a lie wrapped in logic. It's comfort dressed as circumstance. Here's the truth. You always have time for what you prioritize. You always have energy for what you value. You always have reasons, but winners act regardless of them. That's the difference. Excuses make you a prisoner. Execution makes you free. Stop explaining. Start executing. Stop rationalizing. Start reinforcing discipline. You don't need to justify the mission. You need to complete it. The deceptive nature of the enemies. These enemies never come with warning signs. They come disguised as protection. Doubt says it's keeping you safe from failure. Fear says it's keeping you alive. Comfort says it's keeping you balanced. Comparison says it's keeping you motivated. Excuse says it's keeping you realistic. They all lie. They're not protecting you. They're imprisoning you. The more you listen, the smaller your world becomes. The less you act, the weaker your mind becomes. You have a choice. You can negotiate with your enemies or destroy them through action. You can talk yourself out of your potential, or you can act yourself into power. That's the key. The counterattack. How do you fight these enemies? Not with emotion, with systems. You don't argue with doubt. You schedule action. You don't reason with fear. You move into it. You don't indulge comfort. You seek friction. You don't feed comparison. You measure internal metrics. You don't excuse failure. You take responsibility and restart. That's your counterattack strategy. Systems, not feelings. Discipline, not dialogue. Action, not argument. Your primitive self wants to talk. Your higher self wants to move. Choose movement. Every time. That's how you win the daily battles. Through pre-decided action. Decide once. Execute daily. Remove negotiation. Remove emotion. Replace both with execution. Summary. You have 5 internal enemies. Doubt, fear, comfort, comparison, excuse. They live inside your head, waiting for weakness. They attack in silence. They whisper, not scream. Your job is to expose them, label them, and then destroy them through execution. This war doesn't end, but the attacks weaken when you stop listening. That's how you win, not by silencing the voices, but by ignoring their orders. You're the commander. You decide which thoughts advance and which retreat. You have a choice. Every time. That's the key. Transition. You've named your enemies. You've seen how they infiltrate your mind and control your behavior. Now it's time to strike first, because the war begins the moment you wake up. The first battle of the day determines whether you lead or follow, command or comply. You've identified the enemies. Now, let's learn where they attack hardest and how to win that battle before it begins. Chapter 3. The morning battle determines the day. The war of the mind begins before sunrise. It doesn't start at work. It doesn't start in meetings. It starts the second you open your eyes. The first 60 minutes after waking determine everything that follows. Win that hour and the day bends in your favor. Lose it, and you spend the next 15 hours trying to recover ground you already gave away. That's the truth. Mornings decide momentum. Momentum decides outcomes. The morning battle is simple. Your higher self wants command. Your primitive self wants comfort. And only one of them gets to lead. The first attack comes quietly. It's the voice that says, 5 more minutes. It's the hand that reaches for the phone. It's the sigh that says, I'll start later. That moment is the opening battle of your day. If you lose there, you lose everywhere. When you hit snooze, you teach your mind that negotiation is acceptable. When you scroll, you teach it that distraction comes before direction. When you delay, you teach it that comfort outranks command. You think it's small. It's not. It's identity training. Every morning you're proving who you are, the commander or the captive, the disciplined or the distracted, the winner or the excuse maker. That's the key. You can't start your day with surrender and expect victory to follow. The primitive advantage. Your primitive self wakes up first. It's older. It's faster. It's louder. Before your higher mind even fully engages, the primitive self launches its attack. It knows your defenses are low. It knows you're groggy. It knows you're weak in those first minutes. It doesn't need strength to win. It just needs your attention. That's why the morning feels heavy. It's not fatigue. It's resistance. It's the psychological gravity of habit trying to pull you back into the old self. You have one weapon that cuts through it: immediate action. When the alarm rings, move. No thinking, no talking, no waiting. Move. That single act shifts control from limbic reaction to conscious command. You reclaim your mind by commanding your body first. That's the rule. Body leads, mind follows. Action precedes motivation. Movement precedes clarity. You don't wait to feel ready. You move until readiness appears. The victory protocol. You can't rely on motivation to win mornings. You need a system. You need a protocol. The morning victory protocol has 3 non-negotiable steps. Step 1, physical activation. Within 60 seconds of waking, stand up. Vertical position. Feet on the floor. Move your body. Stretch. Walk. Do push-ups. Anything that signals your nervous system. We're up. We're active. We're in control. That's how you transition from reactive to responsive. Your physiology sets your psychology. Step 2, zero digital contact. No phone, no notifications, no scrolling, no messages. You must protect the first hour of the day like a soldier guards a command post. The first hour sets your internal frequency. If you let the world in too early, you lose the signal of your own mission. The moment you check your phone, your mind becomes a battlefield for other people's agendas. You've already surrendered focus before you've earned it. Don't let external chaos set your internal state. You command the first hour, then the rest of the world can enter on your terms. Step 3, one hard task. Do something difficult before breakfast. Something your mind resists. It could be a workout, deep work, reading, or anything that forces engagement. The goal isn't the task. The goal is training dominance. You're teaching your mind. We act on command. We do hard things first. You start the day proving you're the one giving orders. That's the victory protocol. Move the body. Protect the mind. Conquer one challenge. Simple. Effective. Non-negotiable. Why it works? Winning the morning isn't about productivity. It's about programming. Your brain learns through repetition and association. If the first thing you do every day is obey weakness, weakness becomes automatic. If the first thing you do is assert command, command becomes automatic. Every morning, you're conditioning identity. You're training one of 2 reflexes, compliance or control. That's why just one snooze matters. That's why just checking messages matters. Because you're training your reflex before you even leave bed. The strongest people you know don't have more willpower. They have better programming. They win the morning so often that obedience to discipline became reflex. You can train that, but only through repetition. That's the key. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. The momentum effect. When you win the first battle, you carry momentum into every other. The energy of command compounds. Discipline becomes easier because your mind starts expecting victory. Decisions become faster because you've already decided who's in charge. Focus becomes stronger because you're operating from clarity, not chaos. That's why the morning is sacred. It's the leverage point of the day. Most people let mornings happen to them. They wake up reacting, consuming, drifting, and then wonder why their lives feel out of control. You're different now. You're deliberate. You wake with purpose. You move with precision. The difference between reactive living and commanded living is won in the first hour of the day. The system upgrade. To make the morning victory permanent, you need systems that eliminate decision fatigue. Decide tonight what tomorrow demands. Lay out clothes. Set your workout. Write your first task. Remove all choices. In battle, hesitation is death. In life, hesitation is drift. Eliminate hesitation through predecision. You don't wake up thinking what to do. You wake up executing what's already decided. That's the military principle of readiness. Mission clarity before engagement. It works the same for the mind. You're the commander. Commanders don't improvise at dawn. They execute pre-built orders. That's how you make mornings automatic victory. The reversal effect. Understand this. The primitive self adapts. When you start winning mornings, it will shift strategy. It will whisper, "You're doing great. Take it easy today." It will rationalize new forms of surrender disguised as balance. You must stay alert. You must keep the standard. Discipline isn't what you do when it's convenient. It's what you maintain when it's not. The standard is non-negotiable. Every day you rise on command. Every day you move before thought. Every day you complete one hard task. That's how the identity becomes permanent. The command principle. You're not fighting to wake up early. You're fighting to prove command. You're teaching your brain, I decide what happens here. That's the key. The real win isn't the task. It's the command itself. Every morning, you're declaring ownership over your life. Every morning, you're reminding the mind. We follow mission, not mood. This is why morning victories change everything. Because they're not about the clock. They're about control. Transition. You've now learned to win the first battle of every day. You've learned that mornings build identity. That immediate action rewires your mind for control. But there's another level of battle that's more subtle. It's not fought with alarms or routines. It's fought with thoughts themselves. You can win mornings and still lose your mind if you don't master your thinking. Because your thoughts are the next frontier in this war. You've conquered the external actions. Now it's time to conquer the internal process. Chapter 4. Thought discipline beats thought control. Most people try to control their thoughts. That's their first mistake. You can't control what appears in your mind. You can only control what you do with it. Your mind produces thoughts the way your lungs produce breath. You don't decide every inhale. You don't decide every thought. But you do decide which ones you keep. That's the key. Thought control is impossible. Thought discipline is not. The illusion of control. You've been told to think positive, to block negative thoughts, to stay motivated. It sounds good. It doesn't work. Because thought control creates resistance. And what you resist persists. The more you try to suppress a thought, the stronger it gets. Tell yourself, don't think about failure, and your brain builds a movie of it. Tell yourself, don't think about fear, and your mind paints it in detail. You can't win a war against your own thoughts by pretending they don't exist. You win by mastering your reaction to them. That's thought discipline, awareness without obedience. The mechanic of the mind. Your brain is a machine built for prediction and protection. It sends you thousands of thoughts per day, most of them automated, recycled, irrelevant. They're background noise. You can't stop the noise, but you can decide which signals to amplify. The disciplined mind doesn't chase every thought. It filters. It observes. It decides which thoughts deserve energy. That's the practice. That's the discipline. The 10-second rule. When a sabotaging thought arises, I'm not ready, this might fail. You have 10 seconds to act before the thought becomes emotion. 10 seconds before it roots itself in your system. The process is simple. Acknowledge it. I'm having the thought that I can't. Name it. That's fear. Separate from it. This is not truth. This is just mental noise. Then act in opposition. You're training your brain to treat thoughts as suggestions, not commands. You're turning noise into data, and data doesn't dictate behavior. That's the skill that separates the reactive mind from the commander's mind. Why suppression fails? Suppression is a trap. It builds pressure, and pressure always finds release. When you suppress fear, it mutates into anxiety. When you suppress anger, it turns into resentment. When you suppress doubt, it reemerges as hesitation. Discipline doesn't suppress, it redirects. You take the energy of the thought and rechannel it into action. Anger becomes fuel. Fear becomes focus. Doubt becomes drive. You don't escape your thoughts. You convert them. That's mental alchemy. That's mastery. The observer position. Thought discipline begins when you stop identifying with every voice in your head. You're not your thoughts. You're the awareness that notices them. The untrained mind believes every thought is truth. The trained mind watches thoughts come and go like passing weather. You don't panic during a storm because you know it will pass. You treat thoughts the same way. They arise. They peak. They pass. You don't need to fight them. You just need to outlast them. That's what awareness does. It creates distance between stimulus and response. And distance equals power. The repetition effect. Every time you respond to a thought differently, you rewire your brain. That's not philosophy. That's neuroscience. Your brain strengthens whatever pathway you repeat. React with fear often enough. Fear becomes default. Pause with discipline often enough. Control becomes default. Each moment of awareness is a repetition. Each act of separation is a rep for the higher self. You're training the mind like a muscle. Every time you catch a thought before it commands you, that's a rep. Every time you act despite resistance, that's a rep. Every time you choose discipline over drama, that's a rep. And like any muscle, repetition builds power. That's the key. Consistency compounds control. The thought log drill. To sharpen awareness, externalize your mind. Use a daily thought log. Every time a limiting thought appears, write it down verbatim. Then write your response beside it. For example, thought, I'll probably fail. Response, this is fear speaking. Act anyway. When you see your thoughts on paper, they lose power. They become data points instead of destinies. After 30 days, you'll notice patterns. The same few thoughts appear again and again. That's proof they're not truth. They're programming. Once you see the repetition, you stop taking them seriously. You don't argue with them anymore. You act anyway. That's thought discipline in practice. The mental battlefield. Understand this. Every thought competes for command. Some thoughts build you. Some thoughts break you. You don't get to choose which ones appear, but you always choose which ones win. You have a choice. That's the key. The war of the mind isn't about silence. It's about selection. The disciplined mind doesn't try to control the battlefield. It chooses its allies wisely. Thoughts of courage, commitment, clarity, those are allies. Thoughts of fear, doubt, delay, those are enemies. You can't stop enemies from appearing, but you can stop handing them weapons. Attention is the weapon. Whatever you feed grows. Feed courage. Starve fear. Feed focus. Starve distraction. Feed truth. Starve excuse. That's the daily process of mental warfare. The command habit. When a thought appears, don't react. Command. Ask, does this thought serve my mission? Does this thought build or break me? Does this thought create action or excuse? If the answer is no, dismiss it. Immediately, command your attention like a soldier commands formation. Stand down. Fall back. Return to mission. This is not arrogance. This is ownership. Most people live as tenants inside their own heads. They pay rent to their insecurities. They follow orders from fear. Not you. You're the commander now. You decide which thoughts stay and which go. You decide what narrative runs. You decide the mission, the power of action. Thought discipline is measured in execution, not emotion. You can't think your way out of mental weakness. You act your way out. Action dissolves overthinking. Action rewires focus. Action restores command. That's why every mental battle ends with movement. When the thought says, wait, move. When it says, what if, move. When it says, you can't, prove it wrong. You can't argue a thought into silence. You can only drown it with action. Every step forward weakens the voice of hesitation. Every decision taken reinforces identity. Every victory compounds belief. That's how thought discipline becomes thought dominance. Transition. You now understand the truth. You can't control every thought, but you can command your response. You've learned that thoughts aren't facts, they're options. You've learned to observe, separate, and act. But the war doesn't end in the mind alone. It extends into the world around you. Because even if you master your thinking, you can still lose your attention. And attention is the modern battlefield. The enemy now is not your thought, it's distraction. You've built command internally. Now you must defend it externally. Chapter 5. The distraction battle is never-ending. Distraction is the modern enemy of discipline. It's invisible, it's constant, and it's winning. You think you're choosing how you spend your time. You're not. You're being chosen by notifications, by noise, by algorithms built to hijack your focus. This is the new war zone, your attention. And every time you lose it, you lose a piece of your life. That's the truth. Distraction doesn't steal hours. It steals direction. And when you lose direction, you lose control. The nature of distraction. Distraction is not random. It's engineered. Every sound, every ping, every red bubble is a trigger designed to pull you back into obedience. Your brain runs on dopamine, anticipation chemicals that reward novelty. Every scroll, every click, every update gives you a hit. You think you're in control. You're not. You're being trained. That's the key. You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to the variable reward system it creates. Your attention has become the most valuable currency in the world, and everyone is trying to spend it before you do. If you don't guard it, you lose it. If you don't direct it, someone else will. The loop of defeat. Distraction runs on a predictable loop. Trigger, craving, action, reward, repeat. It starts small, a vibration, a thought, a tab. Then comes the craving, the itch to check. You give in. You scroll. You get the dopamine spike, and your brain learns the loop. You've just rewarded interruption. And what gets rewarded repeats. The next time, the loop is faster. The craving stronger. The resistance weaker. That's how you become a slave to small distractions, one tap at a time. And it doesn't stop at phones. It's everything. Email, news, gossip, multitasking. You think you're being productive because you're busy. You're not. You're fragmented. You're spread thin. You're unfocused. That's how distraction wins, by making you mistake motion for progress. The high cost of fragmentation. Every distraction has a cost. Not just time. Attention residue. When you switch tasks, your brain takes minutes to fully refocus. You think you're back in control after checking a message. You're not. Part of your mind is still there, thinking, lingering, waiting for the next hit. Do this 50 times a day, and your focus is shattered. You've trained your brain to live in partial attention, always scanning, never immersed. Deep work becomes impossible. Discipline becomes exhausting. Progress becomes inconsistent. You can't build an empire with a scattered mind. You need single-pointed focus. That's the weapon of mastery. The defense system. To win the distraction battle, you need a defense system stronger than your cravings. You can't rely on willpower. You need structure. Systems replace strength. Here's your protocol. Step 1. Physical barriers. Remove the triggers. Put your phone in another room. Use app blockers. Silence notifications permanently. Make distraction physically inconvenient. Every second of friction you add creates distance between impulse and action. That distance saves hours of focus. Step 2. Environmental design. You can't focus in chaos. Design a command center for your mind. Clean workspace. Minimal noise. No clutter. One tool. One task, one objective. Your environment should scream clarity. If your space is noisy, your mind will be too. Step 3. Replacement protocols. You can't simply remove distraction. You must replace it. When you feel the urge to check, redirect. 10 push-ups, 10 deep breaths. Write a line of your project. The goal isn't avoidance. It's transmutation. You turn distraction energy into focus energy. That's the system. Physical, environmental, behavioral. 3 layers of defense for a single goal. Protect your attention at all costs. The deep work weapon. Once defense is active, offense begins. You need structured deep work. Deep work means sustained, uninterrupted concentration on one meaningful task. No tabs, no multitasking, no noise. Start with 30 minutes, then 60, then 90. Train your brain to operate without stimulation. Set a timer. Lock in. Attack one problem with total immersion. You'll feel withdrawal at first. That's your addicted brain detoxing from dopamine dependency. Push through it. After 20 minutes, clarity appears. Your thinking sharpens. Your productivity triples. You start creating instead of reacting. That's the shift from slave to strategist. You're no longer chasing distractions. You're commanding focus. That's the key. Distraction fades when purpose dominates. The 90-90 rule. For the next 90 days, dedicate the first 90 minutes of your workday to deep work. No phone, no messages, no multitasking. Just one mission-critical task. That single habit will change your trajectory. Because 90 minutes of deep work is worth more than 9 hours of shallow motion. You'll produce what others can't because you operate in a state they've forgotten how to reach. That's how mastery is built. Through uninterrupted creation, day after day. You don't need to outwork the world. You need to outfocus it. The mental armor. Distraction isn't only external, it's internal. Your own thoughts can hijack your focus faster than any phone. I wonder what's next. I should check this. I need a break. That's your primitive self craving stimulation again. When it happens, use this phrase. Back to mission. Say it out loud if you must. It breaks the thought loop. It re-anchors attention. It reminds the brain who's in charge. You're not fighting the urge to check. You're reaffirming command. Every repetition builds armor. Every time you return a mission, the craving loses power. That's how you build mental toughness through repetition of refocus. Why you must win. Understand this. Distraction is not harmless. It's destruction in disguise. Every moment you lose to distraction compounds into days, weeks, and years of diluted life. That's the real cost. Not lost minutes, lost mastery. The average person checks their phone hundreds of times a day. That's hundreds of mental defeats. Hundreds of times the primitive self wins. You can't build greatness while being interrupted every 5 minutes. You can't lead if you're constantly reacting. You can't create if you're constantly consuming. You have a choice. Every notification is a test. Every scroll is a surrender. This is war. Treat it like one. The command protocol. Here's how you win consistently. Schedule your distractions. Don't eliminate them. Contain them. Set specific times for messages, updates, or entertainment. Outside those windows, all communication is off limits. Your mission deserves protection. You decide when to consume. You decide when to respond. You decide when to re-engage. That's how you turn distraction into discipline, by turning reaction into choice. The modern battlefield is digital, but the weapon is ancient. Attention. Whoever controls it wins. Control yours. Command it ruthlessly. That's the only path to sustained dominance. Transition. You've now learned how distraction destroys focus, fractures identity, and weakens command. You've built defenses. You've built systems. You've taken back control of your attention. But distraction is only one kind of sabotage. There's another that runs deeper, one that doesn't come from outside, but from within. Even when everything's working, you find yourself destroying progress. You delay, you detour, you derail. That's not distraction. That's self-sabotage. And it's the most dangerous battle of all, because the enemy looks exactly like you. Chapter 6. Fighting the Battle of Self-Sabotage. The hardest enemy to see is the one inside the gates. Self-sabotage is that enemy. It doesn't attack with noise. It attacks with comfort. You build momentum, then stop. You see progress, then backtrack. You taste victory, then find a way to lose it. That's not bad luck. That's self-sabotage doing its job. The question isn't whether you sabotage yourself. You do. Everyone does. The question is whether you can see it before it destroys the mission. The purpose of sabotage. Self-sabotage isn't random. It's protection disguised as destruction. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, not successful. Change feels dangerous because it threatens the familiar. So when you start winning, your mind triggers defense protocols. It whispers, slow down. You've done enough. You might fail if you keep going. Those voices aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect the old identity. Because growth means death to the old self. That's the key. Your brain would rather keep you comfortably mediocre than risk the pain of transformation. The pattern of collapse. Self-sabotage follows a pattern. It's predictable once you see it. First comes progress. You're consistent. You're focused. Things start working. Then comes tension. You feel pressure. Your identity feels stretched. The primitive self panics. Next comes release. You find relief in comfort, distraction, or chaos. You skip the workout. You binge the show. You start a pointless argument. For a moment, it feels good. Then comes collapse. Guilt, frustration, shame, and the cycle begins again. Progress, tension, release, collapse, over and over until you call it fate. It's not fate, it's programming. The three faces of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage shows up in three main disguises. Face 1, undermining. You quietly weaken your own effort. You cut corners. You half commit. You say, it's good enough. You don't fail outright. You drift downward slowly. Phase 2, procrastination. You delay the decisive action. You convince yourself you're preparing, researching, waiting for the right time. But delay is decay. Every minute you wait, resistance grows stronger. Phase 3, self-medication. You escape the discomfort of growth with indulgence. Food, alcohol, entertainment, drama. You tell yourself you're relaxing, but you're really running. Different masks. Same motive. Avoid discomfort. Protect the old identity. That's the pattern you must break. The awareness strike. You can't defeat what you won't name. So you start by catching it in the act. The next time you feel yourself drifting off mission, pause and ask one question. What am I protecting myself from right now? Be honest. It's not laziness. It's fear. Fear of failure. Fear of success. Fear of rejection. Fear of change. When you see the fear behind the sabotage, it loses power. Because fear exposed is fear weakened. That's the awareness strike, the first counterattack in this battle. The counteroffensive. Once you spot self-sabotage, don't analyze it. Act against it immediately. If you feel like skipping the gym, go. If you want to delay the call, make it. If you want to stay silent, speak. If you want to quit, double your effort. That's the counteroffensive. You act directly against the sabotaging impulse. Each time you do, you rewire the system. You prove to your brain that discomfort isn't danger. It's progress. That's the key. Self-sabotage dies in the presence of decisive action. You can't think your way out of it. You must move your way out. The environment trap. Most sabotage doesn't come from weakness. It comes from proximity. Your old environment was built by your old self. It supports the behaviors that kept you small. If you stay there, sabotage will always find you. You can't fight for discipline while living inside a structure built for distraction. You can't build new habits surrounded by people invested in your old ones. Environment always wins. Change the triggers. Change the surroundings. Change the people if you must. It's not about loyalty. It's about survival. You don't need their permission. You need progress. That's the discipline. Protect your growth like it's a fortress under siege, because it is. The reward reset. Many people sabotage because they've attached reward to relief instead of results. They work hard, then reward themselves by escaping the work. That's backwards. You're training your brain to associate success with retreat. Reset your reward system. Make progress the pleasure. Make growth the gratification. After a workout, don't celebrate by skipping tomorrow. After a win, don't celebrate by relaxing for a week. Celebrate by reinforcing the standard. Reward repetition, not relief. That's how you teach the brain to crave discipline instead of escape. That's the key. Pleasure follows persistence, not pause. The identity shift. Self-sabotage ends when identity updates, because the old self no longer has permission to run the system. You can't act like the new version of you while still identifying as the old one. The old you breaks promises. The old you avoids pressure. The old you needs motivation. The new you executes. The new you thrives under pressure. The new you acts without negotiation. Say it out loud. That version of me doesn't exist anymore. You're not fighting for transformation. You're enforcing it. The war of the mind is an identity war. Once you decide who you are, every action becomes enforcement. That's how sabotage stops. It runs out of identity to protect. The 24-hour rule. When you slip, and you will, recover within 24 hours. Never let a bad day become a bad week. Never let one failure turn into a pattern. The primitive self loves momentum in the wrong direction. Stop it fast. Rebuild the habit the next day. Reinforce the standard immediately. No guilt. No story. Just return to mission. That's the rule that separates amateurs from professionals. Amateurs fall and stay down. Professionals fall and get back on schedule. Discipline isn't perfection. It's recovery speed, the new reflex. After weeks of awareness, action, and correction, something changes. Sabotage stops feeling powerful. It starts feeling predictable. You see it coming. You expect the whispers. You recognize the pattern. And instead of falling, you smirk. Because you've seen this battle before, and you already know how it ends. That's mastery, not the absence of sabotage. It's irrelevance. Transition. You've now learned to see the internal traps that pull you back just when you're moving forward. You've learned to turn awareness into immediate action. You've learned to rebuild faster than you fall. But there's another enemy that doesn't live in your habits. It lives in your history. Even when you change your behavior, it keeps pulling from the past. It's the version of you that refuses to die. The one still living in old patterns, old environments, old emotions. You can't win the present while being loyal to the past. The next battle is against that pull. It's time to face the ghost of who you used to be. Chapter 7. The battle against your past self. The most persistent enemy you'll ever face isn't external. It's not doubt. It's not fear. It's not distraction. It's the version of you that refuses to die. Your past self is powerful. It's familiar. It's comfortable. It knows every weakness you have because it built them. You can change your goals. You can change your habits. But if you don't confront your past self, it will drag you backward every time you try to move forward. This is the battle most people never fight. They try to build a new life while living under the same rules that built the old one. That's why they keep relapsing into the same cycles. You're not losing to circumstance. You're losing to history. the grip of the old identity. Every action you take reinforces an identity. The longer you've lived as one version of yourself, the more your environment, habits, and relationships have been shaped to support it. That's why change feels like resistance. It's not just behavior you're altering, it's the entire infrastructure that sustains it. Your old identity has routines that feed it, people who reinforce it, places that remind you of it, beliefs that protect it. You can't fight for a new identity while still operating in the system built for your old one. That's the key. Transformation requires demolition. Before the new you can live, the old version must die. Not physically, psychologically. You have to dismantle everything that keeps you loyal to who you were. The familiar prison. The past self doesn't use chains. It uses comfort. The couch that holds your old habits. The phone that holds your old distractions. The friends that hold your old limitations. You think you've changed because your intentions are new. But intentions mean nothing inside the wrong environment. Your surroundings are coded for the old you. An environment always wins. That's why you relapse into patterns that no longer make sense. You're living in a system calibrated for who you used to be. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your environment. That's the truth. The necessary purge. If you want to evolve, you must burn the bridges that lead back. Delete the apps that pull you into old loops, and the conversations that pull you into old thinking. Let go of the relationships that pull you into old energy. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You're not abandoning people. You're abandoning patterns. You're not rejecting the past. You're protecting the future. You have to create friction between who you were and who you're becoming. Because friction creates distance, and distance creates freedom. You don't need permission to evolve. You just need commitment. That's the discipline that most lack, the courage to outgrow everything that no longer aligns. The infrastructure of the new self. Once you dismantle the old system, you must build a new one deliberately. You can't leave the battlefield empty. Nature hates a vacuum. You replace every old cue with a new one. If your old self wasted mornings, create a morning ritual that demands movement. If your old self surrounded itself with negativity, create a circle of ambition. If your old self avoided silence, create space for solitude. Structure builds identity. You don't rise to the level of desire. You rise to the level of design. That's the key. Design your days around the behaviors of the person you intend to be. Don't wait for motivation. Engineer inevitability. When the system supports the mission, willpower becomes irrelevant. The resistance of loyalty. One of the hardest parts of this battle is guilt. You'll feel like you're betraying something by changing. You'll think you owe the old version of yourself loyalty. You don't. That version got you here. It did its job. It's time to thank it and move on. Growth requires betrayal. Betrayal of who you used to be. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve progress and preservation at the same time. You have to choose. You have a choice. Keep honoring the old story, or write the new one. That's the key. Freedom requires disloyalty to limitation. The ghost effect. Even after you've built a new system, the ghost of your past self lingers. It doesn't want control. It wants attention. It whispers. It tempts. It reminds you how easy it was to stay small. You'll hear it when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're doubting yourself. It'll say, "You've changed too much," or "You're not that person." When that voice appears, don't argue. Acknowledge it. Then say one thing. That version of me no longer exists. Say it every time the ghost tries to resurrect itself. You're not negotiating. You're reaffirming command. That's how you break the hold of the past, through repetition of truth. The power of environment. If you want to accelerate this transformation, align everything around the new identity. Change what you see. Change what you hear. Change what you read. Change who you talk to. Your senses are gateways to your subconscious. Feed them the signals of the person you want to be. Look at your environment right now. Does it reinforce strength or weakness? Does it push you forward or pull you back? Every object, every screen, every sound is programming you. Make sure the code matches your mission. That's not aesthetic, it's strategy. The ritual of replacement. The old self can't survive without routine. So replace every old behavior with a deliberate alternative. Old pattern, comfort. New pattern, challenge. Old pattern, distraction. New pattern, focus. Old pattern, avoidance. New pattern, confrontation. You're not removing behavior. You're rewriting the code. Every replacement is a victory. Every substitution is a declaration of war against your past. You're proving that you control the program now. That's how identity becomes permanent. The final separation. At some point, you'll wake up and realize the battle has shifted. You're no longer fighting the old self. You've outgrown it. Its temptations don't appeal anymore. Its environment feels foreign. Its friends speak a language you no longer understand. That's when you know the war is turning. You've stopped trying to escape the old you. Now the old you is trying to keep up. That's transformation, not an act, a state. You become the person your past self couldn't imagine. And there's no going back. Transition. You've now learned how to fight the gravitational pull of your old identity. You've dismantled the environment that sustained it. You've built new systems that serve your evolution. You've created distance between who you were and who you're becoming. But now comes the question that separates the temporary from the permanent. How long can you sustain discipline when it no longer feels exciting? How do you keep winning when the war becomes routine? That's where the next battle begins. The battle of consistency, where discipline becomes automatic. Chapter 8. The discipline battle gets easier over time. Discipline feels like war in the beginning. Every choice is resistance. Every action is effort. Every step forward feels like dragging weight through mud. That's normal. That's the entry fee. But here's what most people never learn. Discipline doesn't stay this hard forever. It gets easier, much easier. Not because life softens, but because you harden. The battle changes form. At first, it's survival. Later, it's maintenance. Eventually, it's identity. The same action that once required every ounce of willpower will one day feel automatic. That's the reward for consistency. That's the power of repetition. You have a choice. Suffer once through discipline or suffer forever through inconsistency. The myth of endless struggle. People quit because they believe the fight never ends. They think discipline is a lifetime of pain. It's not. It's a season of construction. Once the structure is built, you live inside it. You don't wake up every day and rebuild your house from scratch. You built it once, and now it stands. Discipline works the same way. You build the foundation through repetition until it holds your behavior without effort. That's the key. You're not building motivation. You're building automaticity. Discipline isn't about doing hard things forever. It's about doing hard things long enough that they become normal. The timeline of transformation. There's a pattern to this. The numbers vary, but the process never does. Days 1 to 21, brutal. Every act of discipline feels unnatural. You fight every urge. You negotiate every decision. This is resistance at full strength. The primitive self fights for survival. You're killing its comfort, and it doesn't go quietly. Days 22 to 66. Tension turns into rhythm. Some habits start to stick. You feel flashes of momentum. But the war isn't over. Complacency creeps in. You start believing you've earned rest. That's the trap, mistaking progress for permanence. Don't slow down. Double down. Days 67 to 90. Automation begins. You no longer debate the action. You just do it. It's not magic. It's neuroplasticity. The brain has built a new pathway that favors discipline over delay. You've rewired your default. And once that happens, the fight changes forever. The science of ease. Your brain rewards what you repeat. Every repetition strengthens the neural connection behind it. Every consistent act of discipline becomes physically easier for your nervous system to execute. That's not philosophy. That's biology. At first, discipline feels unnatural because the neural circuits are weak. The signal struggles to fire. After weeks of repetition, the pathway thickens. The signal travels faster. Less friction. That's why consistency beats intensity. Short bursts of massive effort don't rewire anything. Daily repetition does. That's the key. Discipline is not a feeling. It's a neurological upgrade. You're not building habits. You're building hardware. The emotional plateau. Between effort and automation lies a dangerous phase, the plateau. It's the period where progress slows and excitement fades. You've built structure, but the results haven't caught up yet. You're showing up daily, but you don't feel transformation. This is where 90% quit. Why? Because they mistake boredom for failure. Boredom is not failure. It's proof you've stabilized. The plateau is where discipline matures. You no longer rely on adrenaline or novelty. You rely on standard. This is the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs chase intensity. Professionals master repetition. That's the key. Consistency after excitement fades. That's real discipline. Turning discipline into default. Once a behavior becomes automatic, you must protect it. Guard it like a soldier guard the post. Automation can regress if neglected. So build rituals that maintain it. Wake up at the same time. Follow the same pre-work sequence. Execute the same shutdown routine. These are anchors. They hold the system steady when life gets chaotic. The mind craves structure. Give it one, and it gives you peace. You don't need to feel motivated when your calendar dictates action. You just follow the system. That's freedom, structure doing the thinking for you. The compound effect. Every disciplined act compounds. Not linearly, exponentially. One disciplined day improves the next. A week of discipline increases focus. A month of discipline alters identity. 3 months of discipline rewires the brain. A year of discipline redefines destiny. Most people quit before compounding begins. They never stay long enough to experience the exponential curve. But when they do, something incredible happens. The war quiets. Not because the enemy disappeared, but because victory became habitual. That's the compounding power of discipline over time. When discipline feels effortless, one morning, you'll realize you didn't think about it. You just did it. You didn't argue with yourself. You didn't debate. You didn't negotiate. You woke up and executed. That's the milestone. That's when you've crossed from discipline to identity. At that point, discipline isn't something you use. It's who you are. You don't force action. Action is reflex. The primitive self no longer commands the system. The higher self runs it by default. That's mastery. That's freedom. Avoiding regression. But beware, ease can breed arrogance. The moment you believe you're immune, regression begins. Never confuse automation with invincibility. The system still needs maintenance. Complacency is a silent assassin. It waits until you stop paying attention. That's why elite performers audit their discipline constantly. They revisit fundamentals. They track adherence. They treat mastery like it's temporary, because it is. That's how they stay sharp while others fade. You don't rise and stay there. You rise and sustain it through vigilance. That's the discipline inside discipline. The mental shift. Once you've built this foundation, something profound shifts. Discipline no longer feels restrictive. It feels liberating. You realize freedom doesn't come from doing what you want. Freedom comes from being capable of doing what's required. You stop chasing balance. You start creating momentum. You stop fighting yourself. You start trusting yourself. That's the payoff. Not ease. Trust. Trust that you'll do what you said you'd do, without argument, without emotion, without delay. That's real self-respect. And that's the moment you understand. Discipline wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Transition. You've now learned the truth. Discipline isn't endless struggle. It's progressive evolution. Every repetition lowers resistance. Every act of consistency strengthens control. Every victory compounds until effort becomes identity. But there's one more war left to fight. The deepest one. Not about habits. Not about behavior. About belief. Because once you've built discipline, you must decide who you are. That's the final battle. The battle of identity, where action becomes embodiment. Chapter 9. The Battle of Identity. The hardest battle is not against habits. It's not against distractions. It's not even against fear. It's against identity. Because until you change who you believe you are, you'll keep sabotaging who you're trying to become. You can't outperform self-image. You can't build a new life with an old identity. That's the root of the war. Everything else, discipline, distraction, doubt, is secondary. Identity decides it all. You act in alignment with who you think you are. If your subconscious identity says, "I'm inconsistent," you'll always find a way to break consistency. If it says, "I'm undisciplined," you'll always fall back into chaos. If it says, "I'm the kind of person who never follows through," you'll live that script perfectly. That's the key. You're not fighting your habits. You're fighting your definition of self. The law of alignment. Behavior always follows belief. If your actions and your identity are in conflict, identity wins. Every time. You can force yourself to act disciplined for a while. But if you still see yourself as lazy, the system will collapse. You can force yourself to eat clean for a few weeks. But if you still believe you're bad with food, you'll relapse. The brain prioritizes alignment. It would rather be consistent than successful. That's why people choose familiar failure over unfamiliar success. You have a choice. Keep living in alignment with a weak identity, or redefine yourself and make your actions match that new standard. That's the key. Until the internal definition changes, every external change will fail. The identity loop. Identity, behavior, and evidence form a loop. What you believe about yourself drives what you do. What you do creates evidence, and that evidence reinforces what you believe. That's the loop that either builds you or buries you. If your belief is weak, "I can't stay consistent," your behavior reflects it. You skip the workout. You delay the project. You break the promise. Each action becomes evidence. The evidence strengthens the belief, and the cycle continues. You can't break the loop by arguing with belief. You break it by changing evidence. Stop trying to believe you're disciplined. Start acting disciplined. Every action is a vote. Every repetition is proof. Every execution is identity reinforcement. That's the key. You don't become who you believe you are. You believe who you repeatedly become. The power of evidence. Identity is built on evidence, not affirmation. Affirmations without action are lies your brain refuses to believe. But evidence? Evidence is undeniable. You don't tell yourself you're disciplined. You prove it by showing up. You don't tell yourself you're focused. You prove it by finishing the task. You don't tell yourself you're a winner. You prove it by winning small battles daily. Every act of discipline is a brick in the wall of identity. Every day you follow through, the wall strengthens. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-image rewires. That's the discipline behind confidence. Confidence isn't built through praise. It's built through proof. You don't need motivation. You need evidence. The false identities you must kill. Your old identity doesn't die willingly. It will disguise itself in subtle ways. It'll pretend to be humility. It'll hide behind logic. It'll whisper, "Don't change too fast." Kill those voices. Kill the identity that says you're inconsistent. Kill the identity that says you're a procrastinator. Kill the identity that says you're not good enough. Because every time you repeat that story, even as a joke, you reinforce it. You are the narrator of your identity, and the story you repeat becomes the reality you live. That's the key. Stop reciting your limitations. Start rehearsing your potential. You don't need their permission to evolve. You don't even need your old self's permission. You just need to stop repeating lies that keep you small. The reprogramming process. Reprogramming identity isn't about instant belief. It's about deliberate repetition. You start with behavior. Then you reinforce it with language. Then you protect it with environment. Behavior builds evidence. Language builds clarity. Environment builds stability. For example, you behave like a writer. You write daily. You speak like a writer. You say, "I write every day." You live like a writer. You surround yourself with books, ideas, and deadlines. Soon, writing isn't something you do. It's something you are. That's identity reprogramming. It's not fantasy. It's repetition. You don't fake it until you make it. You act it until you become it. The resistance of the old self. The moment you start changing identity, resistance increases. Why? Because your old identity senses extinction. You'll hear thoughts like, "This isn't you. You're pretending. You're not ready." That's normal. It's not truth. It's withdrawal. Your brain is detoxing from its old self-image. Keep going. Don't argue with the voice. Outlast it. That's the rule. You don't negotiate with resistance. You out-discipline it. Once you stack enough evidence for the new self, the old one loses authority. The war quiets because the old general has lost his army. The new standard. When identity shifts, standards shift automatically. You stop asking, "How do I stay motivated?" You start asking, "How do I protect my standard?" Motivation fades. Standard sustains. You no longer debate whether to show up. You show up because that's who you are. You no longer think about quitting. You couldn't if you tried. You operate on a new baseline. The behaviors that once required effort now feel effortless. The habits that once felt extraordinary now feel normal. That's identity. When extraordinary becomes ordinary, you've changed at the deepest level. The identity audit. Audit yourself regularly. Write down 3 sentences. Who I used to be, who I am now, who I'm becoming. Then audit your actions. Do they align with the second or the first? If your behavior aligns with who you used to be, you're regressing. If it aligns with who you're becoming, you're advancing. This audit keeps your focus forward. You can't evolve accidentally. You evolve consciously. That's the discipline of identity. Constant self-assessment. Without it, you drift back into the comfort of the old story. The unbreakable self. When you've accumulated enough evidence, something happens. You stop hoping. You start knowing. Knowing that you'll follow through. Knowing that you'll execute. Knowing that you'll win. That's unbreakable identity. Confidence without arrogance. Calm without complacency. Strength without noise. No one can give it to you. No one can take it away. It's built internally, brick by brick, decision by decision, proof by proof. That's mastery. That's the end game. Transition. You've now fought and won the hardest internal battle, the battle of identity. You've learned to rebuild your self-image with evidence, not emotion. You've learned that belief follows behavior, not the other way around. You've learned that identity decides consistency, and consistency decides destiny. But now you stand at the edge of the final lesson. What happens when the war quiets? What happens when victory becomes your normal state? When the old enemies no longer threaten you, and your inner command is absolute. That's where peace begins, the peace that comes after dominance, after mastery, after total internal control. Chapter 10. Winning the war creates permanent peace. Every war has an end, but not all warriors make it there. Most burn out before they break through. They win battles, but never find peace, because they never understand this final truth. Winning isn't the end of the war. It's the beginning of command. Peace is not what happens when the fighting stops. Peace is what happens when you control the battlefield. You don't eliminate the noise. You rise above it. You don't silence the mind. You master it. That's permanent peace. And it's only earned through victory in the war of the mind. The end of constant struggle. When you've fought long enough, disciplined long enough, resisted long enough, rebuilt long enough, something shifts. The internal noise fades. Not because life gets easier, but because your mind gets stronger. You stop reacting to every thought. You stop chasing every impulse. You stop fearing every discomfort. You're no longer at war with yourself. You've unified command. One voice leads now, the higher self. That's the turning point. You've evolved from fighter to commander, from reactor to director, from chaos to clarity. This is what all the struggle was for. Not comfort, control. That's the key. Permanent peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of control, the death of old enemies. When you reach this stage, your old enemies don't disappear. They lose their power. Doubt still whispers, but it sounds small. Fear still appears, but it doesn't move you. Comfort still tempts, but it doesn't seduce you. Distraction still knocks, but it no longer enters. You've stripped your enemies of influence. They exist, but they're irrelevant. That's when you know you've won. Not when you destroy your thoughts, but when they can no longer command your behavior. The world doesn't change. You do. And that internal shift changes everything. You used to be controlled by your mind. Now your mind works for you. You've turned the battlefield into a headquarters. The calm of command. Command feels different from control. Control takes energy. Command conserves it. Control is forcing yourself to do the right thing. Command is naturally doing the right thing. Control is manual. Command is automatic. You spent months rewiring thought patterns, designing systems, building standards. Now those systems carry you. The work no longer feels like war. It feels like order. You don't wake up and wonder if you'll do what's required. You wake up and do it. No negotiation. No hesitation. No noise. That's the peace that discipline buys. Not a soft peace. A structured peace. That's the key. Peace is the reward for control, not the escape from it. The still mind. The mind you've trained is no longer reactive. It's still, focused, calm under pressure. When chaos hits, you observe first, act second. When conflict arises, you calculate before you react. When emotion spikes, you breathe instead of break. Stillness is not laziness. It's precision. You've learned to pause, not paralyze. You've learned to assess, not assume. You've learned to decide with clarity instead of emotion. This is mastery, the final form of discipline. Not loud, not aggressive, but stable. The most powerful mind is the one that doesn't flinch. The architecture of mastery. At this level, life itself becomes a structure you design, not chaos you endure. You schedule strategically. You act intentionally. You speak selectively. You've learned to deploy your energy where it matters most and ignore everything else. You're no longer chasing dopamine hits. You're collecting strategic wins. You're no longer addicted to movement. You're addicted to results. That's when success compounds at speed. Because focus has no friction. You've become efficient. Not because you rush, but because you waste nothing. Time, energy, emotion. all optimized. You've reached operational mastery, the elimination of internal resistance. Internal resistance is the greatest thief of peace. The constant argument between I should and I will. That voice is gone now. You've silenced it through evidence, through execution, through consistency. When you've proven yourself enough times, there's no more debate. You don't need to convince yourself. You don't need to hype yourself. You trust yourself. That's the peace most never reach. Internal alignment. You no longer resist your own commands. You no longer question your own authority. You've built unity within your system. And when there's unity, there's peace. The difference between freedom and escape. People think freedom means doing whatever they want. That's not freedom. That's chaos. Real freedom means you're no longer controlled by impulse. You're no longer enslaved by desire. You're no longer reactive to circumstance. Freedom isn't escape from structure. It's dominance within it. The undisciplined mind wants escape. The disciplined mind builds power. And power, properly directed, creates peace. That's the hierarchy of control. Discipline builds freedom. Freedom builds peace. Peace builds legacy. The warrior's transition. Every disciplined person reaches a moment where the external war ends and the internal one transforms. You're no longer fighting for survival. You're leading for expansion. The energy that once went into resistance now goes into creation. You're not just defending your mind. You're building from it. This is how warriors become leaders. How soldiers of discipline become architects of destiny. You're not the same person who began this war. You've been forged, tempered, refined. The chaos that used to overwhelm you now obeys you. That's what all the discipline was for. To earn the right to direct your life without inner resistance. The final test. But even mastery must be tested. Life will test it. Pressure will test it. People will test it. When it happens, don't flinch. Smile internally. You're being given the chance to demonstrate control. You don't prove mastery in peace. You prove it in adversity. That's why you welcome challenge now. Because every new storm confirms your strength. You no longer fear the test. You invite it. Because testing is training. And training is life. That's the mindset of a master. The peace beyond victory. Permanent peace doesn't mean comfort. It means clarity. It means knowing who you are and what you do without hesitation. It means your actions are unified with your beliefs. It means you live without inner noise. You stopped reacting. You've started directing. You stopped fighting yourself. You've started commanding yourself. That's not the end of the war. That's victory. That's peace earned through dominance, not surrender. You've become the person your weaker self could never defeat. You've mastered the mind. You've won the war. You've walked through every battlefield. The war between higher and lower self. The war against distraction. The war against sabotage, doubt, fear, and identity. And now you stand at peace, not because the world changed, but because you did. You control the battlefield now. You command the mind. You direct emotion. You decide thought. You dictate action. That's mastery. That's freedom. That's permanent peace. So here's your final order. Wake up every day and win the invisible battles. The ones no one sees. The ones no one applauds. The ones that build the unbreakable self. Win them until it's no longer a fight, until it's who you are. Because once you've won the war of the mind, everything else follows. You don't chase control. You're control. You don't chase peace. You embody peace. This is your war. And now, it's over.